Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just waiting to make sure that everybody has joined us. I think we can make a start. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Esther Borrett, and I work for Brimstone Psychology, which is a small educational psychology service in East Anglia. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about two different but interlinked interventions called RESTA and RESO. And this was something that myself and my team have developed since 2018, and really excited to introduce it to you all. So thank you. So if we look at the story behind the program, okay, so this is me. I am the first and the only person in my family still to go to university. By definition, I'm a high ACE scorer, so I've got quite a lot of adverse childhood experiences. I was the daughter of a single mother, one of 4 children, and according to my head of year, I was the biggest disappointment to come out and collect their GCSE results. Bless him. We had a fantastic relationship, but there's no doubt that he was disappointed with that. I gained 4 of the predicted 9 GCSEs. But it's because I had quite a lot going on in my background at the time of sitting GCSEs. I grew up in quite a socially deprived area and I dropped out of education. So my route into psychology has been a long route. It took me quite a while to get there to practice psychology. But what I've realised is that I am not the only one. So the concept of resilience was something that I observed before I had a label for it. Alongside my personal experience, I was working in post 16 with returners to education. And I noticed that many of them had dropped out of education because they had this set of adverse experiences in their background. But they came back into education with a kind of renewed optimism, energy, and motivation that enabled them to be really successful in education second time around. And at first I thought to myself, what is the magic switch? What's happened to enable these people to be successful in education second time around? I now realise that thinking about it as a magic switch is a completely wrong way of looking at it. I learned from conducting my doctoral research, which we will explore in a bit, that actually it's one of the most important aspects is developing educational resilience from the connected systems around that individual. So whereas I had naively gone into my doctoral research thinking what's different about these individuals, I soon began to realize that it's much more than the individual on their own. And it was about the connections and the support and the sense of belonging that these individuals had, that it was kind of like a dynamic interplay between these individuals and their system, and that's often missed when people talk about resilience. So armed with these findings from my doctoral research, I began thinking about how we could design intervention to support educational resilience. And at the same time, I began having requests from the colleges that I was working with to kind of seek to support their students with well-being and retention and with resilience. So a recent BBC article, it was entitled Child Mental Health Crisis, Better Resilience is the Solution, really highlighted that escalating mental health struggles experienced in young people in the UK has become quite a startling statistic. They argue that actually, whilst mental health awareness is important, resilience may hold the key to solving the crisis in the long run. And the article was really well timed for us because it echoed what we already knew as a programme, that while early intervention is essential for addressing mental health, developing resilience is the most sustainable approach for helping young people, not only to survive, but to thrive in the face of adversity. So our programme began in 2018, where myself and other educational psychologists at Suffolk County Council began delivering a resilience programme that I had developed to further education colleges. However, in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, colleges reported that they had a dramatic increase in the number of students that needed access to the programme. And we realised that this model of educational psychologists delivering the programme was not sustainable. So from 2020 until 2024, I began writing and rewriting the programme as more evidence came to light. And I collaborated with these colleges that I'd been working with to develop a programme that could be delivered by their setting staff underneath the supervision of educational psychologists. And this was the emergence of the current Resilience Support Teaching Assistant, or RESTA programme. So we'll have a look at what the view of resilience is within the RESTA programme. So our definition is that educational resilience is a process. It's derived from interactions between the individual and its systems across the life course. And it's those kind of interactions that lead to this positive adaptations in education, despite earlier risk or despite earlier adversity. So educational resilience refers to the ability for an individual to achieve positive educational outcomes despite facing risks or adversities. So it's not a fixed trait. It's a dynamic process that evolves over time through these interactions between the individual and their environment. And the process occurs throughout a person's life. It involves continuous interactions with systems. So with the family, with the community, and with school. And it's these interactions that help develop skills and strategies to overcome challenges and to succeed when there are setbacks. Or as Beck Thompson put it, Beck was the first guest on our new podcast, where we're talking to people that have kind of demonstrated resilience, about what resilience is. Beck, who had a very traumatic upbringing, says that resilience is a skill, and we develop that skill through relationships. So RESTA really emphasizes the dynamic relationships in resilience, because resilience is shaped by ongoing reciprocal relationships between the individual and their environment. And it's about how these individuals adapt and thrive in their educational journeys despite challenges. So the RESTA view of resilience is grounded in ecological systems theory, which highlights the importance of dynamic relationships. So next we'll look at the research that underpins this view for us. So the original research that underpins the RESTA programme was carried out as part of my doctoral journey. Like I said, I had this view of what happens to these returners to education, how come they can be successful second time around. So what I did is I used both a visual and participatory research method. I brought the young people, so returners to education, they were studying an HE Access course. I brought them alongside as co-researchers to really look at what are the processes of educational resilience. And we did this by them producing collages that mapped out their lifespan from early years until present day. So we looked at early years, primary school, secondary school. We concentrated on what had gone on in that gap between education and then their return to education. And as I said, I brought them alongside as co-researchers. So all the themes that came up were themes that they decided on. So we can have a look at them now. So they came up with a number of themes, but we synthesized these down into 3 main findings. And they won't be a surprise to many of us in education that the first theme that came up was the theme of support and connectedness and sense of belonging. So those, I think, are quite well-known concepts within resilience, is the idea of this relational element to it. But what was surprising for us all was the third theme that came up. And this one, I had to think about this quite carefully, but it was growth from adversity, and the role that reflection had played within that growth. So if we look now to the next slide, we're going to have a look at what the students said in regards to their experience of adversity and how they think they grew from that. So the adversity that they had experienced included things like economic instability, physical, emotional, mental abuse, relationship breakdowns, death of family members, but also loss of children, perhaps through disconnections and a lot of divorce and discord. And there was a high number of mental illness. There was some substance abuse students who were in recovery. And the most common view held by all of them was that the adversity that they had experienced could highlight their individual capabilities. And they felt that through this adversity, they'd got a set of skills, strengths, and resources that actually transformed them. So rather than looking at their adversity that put them in a position of stuckness, they'd been able to grow from that position. But it was reflection that was key to that. So that gap in education was actually a period where they had enough of a distance from the adversity to be able to really think about what the capabilities, resources, and skills they had gained were, and then thought, well, I'm going to apply this now to education. So we'll look at how exactly that works. So I'll take a quote from one of the students here. It's almost like you learn from experience in that gap. You need it to happen so that you can learn from the bad experiences. It's about finding yourself in the gap. So at the top there, we've got all the different adverse experience that these co-researchers had experienced. And then we've got the gap. So what happens in that gap is that they had this awareness that what they had experienced was different. That was the first thing. The second thing was they went through cognitive appraisal. They started to look at this set of adverse experiences and think to themselves, actually, what were the strengths, resources, capabilities and the coping mechanisms that they had? And it was that gap that allowed that cognitive appraisal to happen because there was enough distance from that adversity. And what happened as a result of that was they got these educational resilience outcomes. So from thinking to themselves, okay, what are my strengths? What are my resources? What are my capabilities? They had increased motivation, a greater confidence in their abilities, better self-belief, a sense of control. They were really aware of what their coping mechanisms were and what strengths they had and how they could apply those strengths. They now realized their potential. And a lot of that had come about from having that practical experience in the gap of going out into the workplace. Of course, the question for us was, how do we get this process to happen without students requiring a gap. And that was really where the RESTA program for us was born, is how do we bring about this reflection? How do we bring about this cognitive appraisal to enable students to get all of these educational resilience outcomes without them having to step away from education? So we'll look briefly at what the RESTA view of resilience and the program is. So the RESTA program trains practitioners, so it trains setting staff to deliver psychoeducation to students, and it focuses on enhancing mental well-being through education, and it's rooted in positive psychology. It's rooted in positive psychology because what it does is it aims to provide skills for mental well-being. And it's based on positive psychology principles, specifically what we call second wave positive psychology, because it recognizes the interplay between positive and negative psychological processes, including adversarial growth. There are two underpinning models to the kind of the RESTA program as it is. The first model is those protective factors, the things that the original group of students had identified, that being support, connections, and growth from adversity. And then the second underpinning model is the applied trauma responsive classroom model. Now, I know that Dr. Gemma Carter, who has written the applied trauma responsive classroom model, has also done an EP reach out. So it might be worth, if you haven't looked at her model, to have a look at her model to really gain an understanding of this. But Gemma's argument is that if we're going to build these resilient skills, we need to do it in a way that's sequential and feels safe for the students. So RESTA is delivered in 11 sessions. We start with psychological safety and relationship building, and then we progress through this set of protective mechanisms so that the end result is that the students have a clearly identified set of protective mechanisms or strengths and resources that they can use when they come across challenges. So it's for that reason that RESTA equips students with skills for life. Many students have found that the process of going through the whole 11 weeks of RESTA is quite transformative, because at the end of the program, they have something tangible that they can actually take forward with them. The program encourages both RESTers, the trained practitioners, and the students to reflect in order to bring out these protective factors. And it understands that trauma and adversity will impact on the way that the student is interacting with the program. And it emphasizes, for that reason, the importance of empathy, safe spaces, and consistent routines to provide to kind of prevent any re-traumatization. So that is the rest of 11 weeks program. For those of you that have noticed that there's not 11 different things there, that's because what we do is we sit in the safety zone for 2 weeks. So we have 2 sessions that are purely about building safety. And at the end, after we've done the last session on optimism and future orientation, where the students have a lovely toolkit of resources, we have a specific session for endings, because whilst we've entered the intervention in a psychologically safe way, we also want to end it in a psychologically safe way as well. So, well, let's have a look at the impact so far. So in the process of conducting research on the impact, we're sort of just rounding up all of the interviews at the moment and starting to look at the themes. But so far, this is what the students say. I'll read out one quote from one of our FE students. This has been so much better than counselling I've had in the past. It feels more helpful. Just talking about my problems has never helped, because I came away not knowing how to change the behaviours that were causing me distress. I feel like I have the tools to do this myself. I'm not broken or a bad person that bad things happen to. And I think this is the main theme that is coming from students. It's the idea of a toolkit. It's that they now feel prepared. They clearly know what their strengths and resources are. The strengths and resources through the activities that we do are elicited from them. So we're not giving them stuff, we're actually activating what's already there. They clearly know how to respond to challenges because they're much more aware of their strengths and resources. They feel empowered to change. We use self-determination theory as we're moving towards the end of RESTA. So there's a great motivation for change. They report that it feels better than just talking about problems. And we're seeing that we're having improved retention, attendance, and engagement. We do have some students that were previously emotional-based school avoiders that are now able to come back into school and access school. And many of them report feeling happy about learning again. I asked the resters to kind of come up with an impact statement as well to bring to you all today. And I said, what have you observed from working with your students? So they said the approach of RESTA, concentrating on safety first, helps students to develop confidence in the session. When they then work to equip the students with practical skills to overcome stress, to overcome setbacks and challenges, what they see is the students' confidence increases even more. Because the students are writing down their tools and they're keeping reminders, they have a reflective diary each week of where they're using these tools and strategies and resources, it becomes more tangible and they can think about how they can apply that to future setbacks too. The kind of targeted exercises improves their ability to reframe their thoughts, to regulate their emotions, and to become more optimistic in their outlook. The resters say that it's incredible to see the students' self-awareness grow alongside their capacity to adapt to different situations and to do that without feeling overwhelmed. By the end of RESTA, they felt more empowered, they felt capable and ready to face future challenges, and they had a renewed sense of control and purpose. But there is a but. So what happened is that resters noted difficulties in their settings, really understanding the programme. And they felt that they wanted their setting to really know and understand the resilience principles. There was discussion amongst our team that actually individual and small group intervention, because RESTA can be delivered in both ways, doesn't adequately address the role that the system plays in developing these protective mechanisms, and therefore it doesn't have impact for all students. What they also found was that the skills that the students had learned in a one-to-one or small group setting might not easily transfer to a larger, more dynamic classroom environment, because the cues and the support that were present in the intervention might not be available within the classroom. So therefore, students often need this kind of explicit instruction about practicing and generalizing their skills. So without the whole class knowing, without the school knowing, or the educational setting knowing what the resilience principles are, we're not able to recognise when the student should be applying these newfound skills. And that kind of left us with a little bit of a dilemma as a team. So next we'll have a look at how we began to address that. So while individual resilience is obviously critical, we wanted to have more of a kind of approach to social resilience. The idea that the support the young person receives from their community will support that resilience level. So in this sense, resilience is not just about individual coping strategies, but also about the support networks that surround the young person. So resilience is more effective when it's embedded in a supportive environment, whether that's at home, whether that's at school, or whether that's in the wider community. So to do this, we wanted to ensure that the students' community engaged in activities where the young person was able to kind of build some connections and to be able to practice these skills. So we developed the RESTA program so that it would work across the whole school or the whole college environment to ensure that this emotional support is interwoven into the fabric, the everyday fabric of the student's life, helping students to develop their resilience through both individual and collective means. So we firmly believe in this statement that it takes a village to raise a child, or in this case, a supportive school community to raise a child. And that's why we developed the Resilience Support Organisation, or RESO, to sit alongside the RESTA system and surround the child or young person in an acknowledgement of what it means to be building resilience principles and to be aware of this kind of complex dynamic, this interplay between protective factors in the individual, but also the environment, recognizing that and recognizing where there may be difficulties. So we'll have a look at the systemic approach that we've developed to ensure this. So by developing both RESO and RESTA, the RESO system of building resilience in students is a multi-tiered and systemic way of providing support. So at tier 1, this kind of change of psychologically informed, evidence-based instruction and support. And what we do is we train organisations over 2 days in this psychologically informed way of building resilience. And that's effective for about 80 to 90% of the students, because those core changes in the curriculum and classroom management strategies. At tier 2, this can be delivered in a small group intervention. So in addition to those changes that are going on in the classroom, this is a kind of more focused effort for resilience building. And then at the top tier, the tier 3, is where we've got this really individualized, person-centered, intensive intervention tailored to the student's unique set of needs. And this is usually delivered one-to-one. So the RESO system enables settings to really identify student needs, to be able to adjust intervention accordingly. And by addressing the diverse needs of all students, the tiered system of RESTA support helps to reduce the disparities in mental health support and ensures that every student has an opportunity to thrive. So we'll look at what these resilience building principles are. So like I said, across 2 days, the whole organisation, all staff are trained, and we insist that's all staff, right down to office support, lunchtime staff, up to senior leaders. And that's because the whole community, the whole system that surrounds that young person needs to have an understanding of what these resilience principles are, so that the opportunities for the young person to practice are there, but also things don't fall flat in terms of understanding. So they're trained in psychological best practice for meeting these core resilience principles, and they gain a really thorough understanding of why we have these principles, the impact that this will have for students, how they work psychologically, and then when they've got those principles, they're encouraged to reflect on their practice and think about the changes that they can make as an organisation. At the end of the second day, the organisation is introduced to a quality mark, of which it's awarded at bronze, silver and gold, for the organisation to be able to demonstrate how they are embedding this building of resilience and begin to look at an organisational plan of how they can meet these principles. After a year, The RESO then presents their organisational plan, they present any changes, they present any impact data to a panel of educational psychologists who will decide whether the organisation's goals and actions, what level they are meeting the quality marks, so bronze, silver or gold. So in this sense, we're not telling the organisation how they should change. We're not telling them how they should practice. Much like the students in our RESTA sessions, we're giving the reasons and we're giving the tools to change, because change is far more likely if it comes with it from within. So therefore, the organisation is more motivated and committed to change when they feel a sense of ownership and when they are invested in that change. So for us as a team, the most exciting part of RESO is that organisations are showing us how to embed the resilience principles. And this is leading to a kind of process of creativity and innovation that can be further shared and passed on. So as a brief summary, and our RESOs only began in August 2024. But they are showing us things like, one organisation has developed a trauma-informed peer supervision model for all staff. Another organisation has changed from behaviour policies to relational policies. They've developed policies and procedures for supervision of staff to support with vicarious trauma. One organisation has developed their whole CPD programme to include resilience building principles for all staff, including training of new staff. They've considered to a greater depth how they are capturing and responding to student voice. And then they've also considered how they develop a sense of belonging and how they respond to those that may be at risk of emotional-based school avoidance. So there's some quite significant changes coming from our RESOs. So you'll see there that the difference between, or the main difference that we feel with RESTA and RESO in our approach is that it's the importance of the system, this shift away from an individual approach to intervention, resulting in a tiered system. And it's that tiered system that we find we're getting buy-in. We're getting buy-in from all staff because it gives them a very structured way of working. The RESTA program is sequential in nature and it's very person-centered. So it's a developmentally appropriate intervention. One of our LA specialist teacher teams described it as RESTA is not just psychoeducation. It's a program of human meaning making that develops skills that will stay with young people for life. We'll continue that RESTA is more than a resilience program. It's transformational moments and strength activation that make it unique. And I think that's something I've been mindful of. Maybe I gave it the wrong name. I've always been interested in resilience, but actually it's more than resilience. The growth from the adversity is the key part. Yes, they can overcome challenges, but they're actually growing in terms of who they understand themselves to be and how they can respond to challenge. It's a relational approach. It emphasizes that the young person needs to feel psychologically safe in order to go through this process and to reach this level of resilient reintegration. It's different from CBT-based programs because there's that influence of positive psychology, acceptance and commitment therapy, so that young people learn to accept that all emotions are normal and that all emotions serve a function. They're much clearer on their internal resources they have to overcome stress and to overcome challenges within the future. So the number one question that we are asked by schools and colleges is what's the difference between RESTA and other interventions like ELSA and Thrive? And ELSAs are, as we all know, are a fantastic resource for children who need support with their emotional literacy. And it's true that both ELSAs and RESTAs are trained and supervised by educational psychologists. A key difference is that ELSAs largely develop their own resources and support programs for their young people, but with RESTA it's kind of research driven, it's structured, it's sequential in its nature. So practitioners can tweak the resources, and the practitioners are often really happy with the bankload of resources that are available for RESTA. They can tweak that because it is a person-centered way of working, but the underpinning model is that it kind of scaffolds the way that the restas work. So the restas actually feel contained in the work that they are doing. RESTA training is more in depth in terms of understanding the psychology behind post-adversarial growth, and through and the psychology of kind of building skills and building connections. Thrive obviously is more about the assessment of developmental milestones and gaps, and targeting those skills and strategies. So therefore, both ELSA and Thrive address specific areas of needs, whereas with RESTA, it doesn't matter where the need or the gap is, you're building a toolkit sequentially. The student knows exactly where they're starting from and where they're heading to. Restas, many of them are trained as ELSAs as well, and they highlight that the kind of radical acceptance, the resource activation, the motivational component of the program adds something powerful and unique. And for them, this is where the program sees the biggest shift for the student. So many of our restas are trained to deliver Thrive, and they're trained to deliver ELSA, but they seem to be able to make very clear, informed decisions about which intervention is best for each student. So in this sense, RESTA is complementary to these other interventions. It's not a direct kind of comparison. So that was a whistle-stop tour of RESTA and of RESO. I think we're going to open up the Q&A so that you can put some questions in. They'll be anonymous, and I will just have a few minutes to answer any questions that you've got. Okay, so lovely question there. Particularly keen on the co-researcher model. What difference do you think it have having young people alongside you? A huge difference, and that's something that we've kept as a team. We actually have a RESTA student consultant, so we have a young person that looks over all our resources and says whether they're suitable for young people, and actually tells me off quite often because I'm using paper-based resources and I need to be getting everything digital. We have always been passionate about doing with rather than doing to. So the co-researcher model has continued all the way through the development of this, and we're constantly feeding back as well about what aspects the young people like and what they don't like. It's made a really big difference because actually within the literature before, there was no participatory research that had involved educational resilience. So nobody had actually picked up on this adversarial growth from reflection theme that the co-researchers did. So that was quite a novel finding for us, and I think has really been fundamentally at the heart of what RESTA is. So another question, what age range is the program designed for? So it was designed originally for post-16, but we have RESTAs and RESOs that are now secondary schools. And we have just finished a primary pilot. We don't have the results of that yet, but we have just finished with training RESTAs who work in primary as well. Can the program last longer than 11 weeks? Yes. We often advise RESTAs, and this is where it's great having a RESO, because schools understand the program, and they know that sometimes a young person may not be ready to move on from that safety and connection stage to start looking at some of the protective mechanisms. So it can last longer than 11 weeks. RESTAs are very skilled, and they do tend to be able to move the student on, but you can sit in that safety stage for longer. Have you found there is more uptake from secondary schools? It feels like there's a big language requirement and emotional literacy insight needed these approaches that possibly may not be there yet. Yeah. We are finding that actually RESTA maybe fills a gap for that group of older young people. So specifically from that sort of year 9 upwards in secondary school, and also for colleges as well, who I think have been largely overlooked in terms of interventions. Are there any RESTA resources available to access? There aren't at the moment. They're only available to our RESTAs, but we are in the process of just editing a handbook that should be available by the end of the year, and there will be some ideas. There's a lovely bit, top tip from RESTAs in there as well. Does the young person have to be in a setting? That's a really good question. We have found, because of the emotional based school avoidance element, of RESTA being having a good impact there, that parents are looking to have RESTAs for their students. So we do have at the moment 4 independent RESTAs that are able to deliver the sessions, and we take referrals through our service, Brimstone Psychology. With the research stemming from post-16, the research space there is specific RESTA interventions still best targeted to older secondary or college age groups. Obviously, the fundamental base of what the students said came from post-16, but they were reflecting on different parts of the lifespan. So they were reflecting on what worked well in primary school, what worked well in secondary school. So there's still that knowledge base, even though they were post-16. So there's that element of the research base there, but also because we have the process of RESTA and RESO has gone through action research all the time. We've begun, will this work? Okay, let's try that. Let's feedback. Because we're actually involving young people in that process as well, we think actually we've got it quite good for secondary school as well. I can't tell you yet about primary. We are yet to find out, but yeah. Is RESTA available for local authorities to buy in as a programme for those not currently in education? Would benefit them. And this is part of why these webinars are taking place, is really just to get the language of RESTA and RESO out there, and for people to understand that it is a programme that can be used. We are currently talking to one local authority at the moment about maybe like a train the trainer model, but it might be a way off doing as yet, because it takes a while and there's only a few of us. But yeah, hopefully that has answered all the questions in the Q&A. Okay, I can just see one question coming up now. It's about train the trainer. We will be moving towards a trainer model, but probably this time next year, I should think. All I would say is just keep looking. I'm quite prolific on LinkedIn, so just keep looking on there. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and thank you.